My name is Karen Walrond. I am a former engineer and a lawyer, current photographer and author. I'm the author of 2 books, one called The Beauty of Different, Observations of a Confident Misfit, that came out about 6 years ago, and my second book is coming out this November called Make Light. And both books are really about finding the gifts that you have and how can you use those gifts to better the world. And I am officially the most uninteresting person up here on this stage. The women that have joined me on this stage are amazing. We have a mountain climber who's climbed Everest. We have the deputy head of astrophysics at NASA. And we have the woman who created female Viagra. So you're in for a treat. So we're just going to go ahead and start right now. And what I'll do is I'll have each of you introduce yourselves, tell everybody your name and what you do, and maybe a little story about how you got to be where you are. So why don't we start with our astrophysicist over here.
Good morning. I'm Andrea Razaghi, and when I finished college with my degree in mechanical engineering, I wasn't sure what I really wanted to do, and sort of stumbled around a little bit and started off working for a Navy contractor where I was working on airborne mine countermeasures. And after doing that for a few years, I realized I didn't want to spend all day long, designing things that were going to blow up other things. And also, I really like to talk a lot, and I didn't like having a job where I couldn't tell people what I was doing. So I was lucky enough to land a job at NASA, and I started off as a hands-on mechanical engineer, and over time, I got to the point where I was in charge of the whole mechanical system for a scientific instrument, till taking care of an entire scientific instrument, to an entire spacecraft, to entire missions, to the point where I became the acting deputy director for planetary science. And I was lucky enough to be in that role when we launched Curiosity and then successfully landed it on Mars, along with a couple other fun project milestones. And then in 2012, I got the job that I have now as the deputy director for astrophysics for the agency. And in this job, I get to enable scientific discovery around some of the most impactful questions humans have ever asked, like how did the universe start? How does the universe work? And are we alone in the universe? So that's how I spend my days, around those questions. When I think about how I got here, I was a little girl who liked to play with power tools. And, my dad was a real do-it-yourselfer, and he had all these power tools, and I'd come and I'd organize this workbench and make stuff, take things apart, try to figure out how things worked. And, as I got older, I realized one of the most important things that my dad never said to me, he never said, girls don't play with power tools. He didn't make a big deal about it at all. I had 2 older brothers, and I was the only one who was interested in this stuff. I didn't think I was doing anything unusual. And then when I fast forward to, I was looking at colleges and talking to my career counselor at high school, he saw that I was good in physics and math, and I liked to work on things. He says, oh, you should think about engineering. I didn't know any engineers. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I guess I'll be an engineer. That sounds good. He never once said, oh, by the way, you're going to be the only girl in your classes.
Yeah. I love the idea. I told her yesterday, I'm like, when people say it takes a rocket science to understand something, do you say, like, hold my beer? I got it. I love that.
Yeah, that's sort of the quick origin story. Yeah.
I love that. Melissa, tell them about Everest.
Yeah, I'm Melissa Arnot, and I work as a professional mountain guide. And I've climbed Everest 6 times. Last spring, I became the first American woman to summit Everest without using supplemental oxygen. Wow. You guys, I just walk slowly uphill. It's not really worth applauding. I'm not solving hunger or doing math or science or anything that really is making the world better, but I do love what I do, and I actually think that's what ultimately makes the world better. And I spend all of my time working, sometimes very stressed out in very high risk, high consequence areas, but always very happy. Always knowing that I'm pursuing, my purpose, and I'm not good at math, but I do walk uphill slowly extremely well. And so I spend my time doing that. And it's amazing. I also had a father who told me that I could do anything I wanted. And just this year, he told me that he didn't actually believe that. He thought that that's just what you tell little girls to give them good self-esteem, but now I've shown him that it's true.
That's great. It's awesome.
I told her if I were to try it, I'd be fetal before I got to base camp, right?
And I would hold you, just like that.
And finally,
I
female
love it.
Viagra.
Female
I can't wait to hear the
Viagra.
story.
So how did I get to female
This is
Viagra?
Cindy, by the way, yes.
Hi, Cindy Whitehead. Claim to fame, female Viagra approved by the FDA. And I thought, Irish Catholic sex, right? That's how I got there. My parents don't like it when I say that. But honestly, I started in pharma at a big company. I went progressively smaller because I thought that's where the real innovation was. And I finally was crazy enough to start something on my own, and I did it with one of the male sexual health drugs. So I knew the pathway, built a good business, a successful business there, but watched this great science emerging in terms of our understanding about female sexuality, and yet company after company was turning and walking away. There were 26 FDA-approved drugs for male sexual dysfunction before we ever got one on the board for women in 2015 when we got our drug approved. And it was this basic. We think that once the bedroom door closes, everything that happens for men is biological, and everything that happens for women is psychological. And the absurdity to that just really ignited me. Both genders bring both things into the bedroom, and for the 1 in 10 women in which there was a biological basis to their lack of desire, I felt strongly they needed a medical treatment option. So that's how I got to female Viagra, and sold the company after approval because it deserves to be globalized. This affects 1 in 10 women, whether I'm looking at Brazil or the US or Japan. And so my new venture is the Pink Ceiling. I have a Pinkubator where I focus on propelling other female-focused or led businesses, particularly the geeks like me in science or engineering.
Tell them how much you sold the business for.
I sold it for $1 billion.
I love it, right? All right, I'll just leave. I'll just get my coat. They're so amazing. So I love this, and I love that all three of you are really in industries that are predominantly male, right?
Yeah.
So I'd love if you guys, I'm going to start with you, Cindy,
Okay.
and we'll go down this way. Tell us a little bit about what some of the challenges were in getting into the businesses that you are in.
Yeah.
And also what maybe some of the happy surprises might have been.
Okay, my challenges were, can you imagine me showing up to talk about female Viagra to a room full of investors? I mean, just put yourself in that mindset for just a minute. Me sitting there, and in truth, I had this great sort of opportunity at the largest healthcare conference. It's called the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference. It's the biggest one every year in bioscience. And I get up, I'm about to go through my spiel. I have 8 minutes on the clock. Really important to me that the room understand it, and the investment. And the giggles start to sort of ripple through the crowd. And it was a lot of lessons learned in that. And I thought, okay, how do I recover this very quickly? So I'm sitting there, pressing through my slide deck, and I put up on the screen basically brain scan imaging of women with this condition, in which you can see a fundamental difference in their sexual response. And I just kind of stopped, stood, pointed to the screen till the room got quiet and said, are you looking at what I'm looking at? And so, I think that there is I've been in an unusual field, particularly because it's sex. So I think that, that was a natural response. I don't know that that's overt bias. I think it's human nature. I think that those investors that were sitting across from me didn't understand it. It didn't directly affect them. They were mostly men. And so what is the happy surprise along the way? The happy surprise is that I changed the way they thought about it, I guess, right? And with perseverance, the happy surprise is I think that if you actually do fight for what's right, if you stay the course, if you wade through all of that underestimation or misconception, you ultimately get there.
Sure. Love that. Melissa?
Yeah, for me, there was some huge challenges in wanting to be a professional mountain guide. I didn't have any other female mentors ahead of me that really showed me that I was capable of doing that. I'm also small. I heard Kristen Bell say she's petite, so she stayed away from sports, and we're really about the same size. And I think that was a challenge to start with, was just thinking, no one here looks like me. And if you've ever been a minority in any situation, you come to understand that that's actually a huge advantage and not a deficit, and something that I can sit in any situation, and that cloak of discomfort of being different sort of goes away the more you experience it. And so it's both sides. You know, my challenge was accessing, being willing to sit in a room with a bunch of big, tall dudes. And when I tell people, oh, I'm a professional mountain guide, they usually are like, no, you're not. But I tell people when I'm flying, I'm like, oh, I work at Starbucks. And no one ever blinks at that. They just accept that as my answer. And I hate that, right? That's what I want to say. What do you see in me that says I can't be a professional mountain guide and climber that I don't see in me? Because I think I can. And I have.
I love that. Yeah, it's amazing. And NASA. So I live in Houston, and I'm a huge space geek anyway, and I'm a former engineer, so I know you were in a very male-dominated field. So tell us about the challenges and the happy surprise that...
So when I first started, I was in a group of engineers. There were 50 engineers, and I was the only woman. And the only other person of color was a man of Indian descent. And this is the truth. The bathroom I used said woman, singular.
Oh my God.
Even though there were 2 stalls. So maybe I was going
We've
to
seen this movie. Have we seen this?
I never understood why it was like that. Or maybe they just had to quickly make sure there was a place. But there was a secretary there. Anyway, so it was a very male environment. And there were just guys who weren't used to having a woman around. And so sometimes I would have to say, don't change your behavior. You may not be used to me, but I'm used to you, okay? Because I'm around you all the time, right? And there were, there's a lot of, like, I'd go to labs and, machine shops, and there were pin-up posters all around on the walls. And the way these guys got these posters is when we would, this is back before the internet, when we wanted to get catalogs for motors or ball bearings or gears and things, you'd get these little pack of cards. And if you saw a catalog you wanted, you'd fill out your name and address, drop it in the mail, and you'd get a catalog in the mail. And a couple of these said, oh, if you get our catalog, we will send you a calendar with Trisha, or, that name stands in my head. And you see this woman who is like in a bikini, and she's got tools around her.
And I always walk around in a bikini with my tools.
Yeah, there's one with the boxing gloves over her bare breast for some reason. So I was feeling very feisty one day and decided I was going to send them a little note. So when I got the packs of cards, I said, not all of your potential customers are men and might find your sexist advertising offensive. And I tossed it in the mail. And so I felt good for the day. Then a few months pass, and I get the pack of cards. I go, oh, yeah, the notes. Yeah. So I'm going through, and I see the one, okay, there's no change. Then I get to the second one, and it looks exactly the same, except on the bottom, in bold print, followed by 4 exclamation points, it says, mail calendars also available.
That's
That's
awesome.
So, not exactly what I was going for.
Exactly.
But to be honest, to give you a better sort of a happy surprise is when I was pregnant with my first child, and I'm in the same group, and we didn't have flex time, and for me to take off time for, I wanted to take 4 months off, and I had to cobble together. I could borrow into the future for my leave. I had to exhaust all my sick leave, then borrow annual leave, and then take leave without pay. So I had to cobble this together to take these 4 months off. And then I wanted to nurse. And so I told my boss, I think, first of all, when I came in there, so I want to talk about my schedule. He had never had to deal with this ever before. Sure. And I think he was just like, okay. Right. And he just, I think he was, he hadn't dealt with this before. So he allowed me to do that.
Yeah, nice.
And this was back in 1988 when I had my first son. And then when I came back and I started talking about the nursing, I think he just didn't want to hear the word nursing anymore. But so I said, I'm going to come in. I created a flex time. I said, I'm going to come in, and at 7:30, I'm going to take an hour and a half off in the middle of the day so I can go to my mother's house and nurse my child, and then I'm going to come back and finish up my day. And that was a flexible schedule, which was not technically available, but he allowed me to do it.
Well, great. That's awesome. All right, we got 2 minutes left. So just to wrap up, I know I would love to stay with these women for much longer, but just to wrap up, and we're going to start with you, Melissa, and then out and in.
Perfect.
And I just some advice for women here. There's lots of women that are in various stages of their career here. Some of them are just starting their careers. Some people are changing their careers, starting something new. So what advice would you give to somebody who's starting a brand new adventure in their life? We'll start with you, Melissa.
Absolutely. I think my best advice is to do the best work that you can all the time. I think sometimes as women, when we are a minority in a male-dominated industry, we will question, did we receive this opportunity because we were fulfilling a quota, or because we were cute, or because they wanted to have us around? And I fix that by working as hard as I possibly can, and so that at the end of the day, I never have to question why I'm actually there. And I think that applies to any new thing you want to do, whether it's professional or personal.
Love that.
And I say, put yourself on people's calendars. If you see someone who's doing something interesting that they have an interesting career path, I still do this. I say, I'm really interested in your story. Can I get on your calendar for a half hour? And they say yes. And I've never been told no when I've asked to do that. And I've created relationships that way, and it helps me understand, what options are still ahead for me.
I love that. And Cindy?
30 seconds on the clock.
Yeah.
Professionally, I would say prepare to be underestimated and then show up and kill them with competence.
Yeah.
And personally, I would say have more sex.
I have nothing to add to that. So thank you guys so much.